Okay, so you're watching and listening to the League of Ireland Lives podcast with myself, Jamie Moore, and we are going to now go to Cambodia to speak to Irish football coach Conor Nestor, former Limerick coach, former FAI employee as well, and he's managing now in the Cambodian Premier League, or at least he was until the lockdown, because Conor, you're very welcome, and you're in lockdown over there in Cambodia as well.
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar to things back home. You can't move from province to province, as they call it here, which would be you can't leave your own county basically. But we've very few reported cases here and no deaths at the moment. So touch wood, it stays like that. But yeah, everything like everywhere in the world is pretty much everything shut down.
Very good. And before we speak about Conor, the move to Cambodia and life over there, you might just give us the background to your coaching career here in Ireland, how you started your stint in the League of Ireland with Limerick, and also you worked for the FAI for something like 8 years as well. Yeah.
So I suppose I was a volunteer coach like everyone is in Ireland to begin with, from about the age of 17. And then I went to the US in 2007 to coach for a company called UK Elite Soccer. The FAI then at that time, around 2008, were opening up a lot of development officer positions, and I was very fortunate to get one in my home county of Limerick. And then as I was developing through your UEFA B and A licenses, I volunteered my services for Limerick FC and worked with under Tommy Barrett for a season with the under 19s, before eventually in 2016 kind of deciding that if I wanted to be a full-time professional coach, if you like, because the DO job is so multifaceted, that I basically had to leave Ireland. So I took that decision in 2015, and eventually it led me here.
Yeah, myself and Conor actually did the A licence together a number of years ago as well. And when we were having a laugh and having a few points and stuff, we were all talking about, our careers and where we maybe wanted to go. Certainly somewhere like where you were wasn't really on the list. So how did you end up in Cambodia?
Yeah, I was telling someone the other day, just be careful what you wish for a little bit. But I remember saying to someone in 2016, I left FAI in June 2016, and actually I went traveling to the US because I had a lot of contacts there, and I thought I'd maybe become like a director of coaching or something in the US. And the opportunities I got, they just weren't kind of for me. So I was waiting for a while to get to the right one. And someone was asking me what I wanted, and I said, look, I don't really care if I end up in Guam. I think is the random location that I picked, so long as I get to work with players every day. Because Jamie, yourself from like being on the A license, unless you're working with players every day, you don't really know if you're any good or not. You know what I mean? And you're up against people that are doing the same. And so that was my desire, and it wasn't Guam. In the end, it was Cambodia. So it's be careful what you wish for, I guess. Yeah.
And how did it actually happen? You must have seen a job advertised online, you applied, you were interviewed via Skype or FaceTime, and then you went over. Was that kind of how it happened, or how did it work out?
No.
Oh, okay.
That would be way too normal. So what happened is I was living in Melbourne, and I still hadn't really found a job that I wanted to do, if you like. But Football Star Academy, who are based all over Australia, but in Melbourne they offered me a director of coaching role, but I had to leave Melbourne while they sponsored me, so there was a process in doing that. And a good friend of mine said, hey, I was in a similar predicament, go to Phnom Penh, I lived there for a while, you'll get a job, come back in a couple of months when your visa comes in. So he was right. I got a job here coaching in international schools during the day, and after a couple of days here, I found myself coaching a semi-pro team in the evenings. That didn't start very well. I nearly got sacked after about 3 weeks. But I guess we eventually turned it around, and the semi-pro team beat a couple of pro teams here that maybe they shouldn't have. And then before the visa came through for Australia, I found myself with a job offer from, I guess, one of the top 4, top 5 teams in the top league here. So it was kind of decision time, and I probably didn't have to think too long about it. I jumped at it. So.
Now, Conor, I have a list of interesting questions, hopefully, to ask you, but I wanted to kind of begin by just asking you to explain to myself and those listening and watching about your life there as a football manager off the pitch. You're sitting in a cafe now, for example, in the middle of the late evening there. You're dealing with trying to communicate with people back in Ireland with a massive time difference. So you might just make this answer as long as you like. Tell us about your life in Cambodia.
Well, it changes every day, really, which is a good thing, I guess, in many senses. But your typical day here for me, prior to obviously COVID-19 and the outbreak and everything, your typical day would probably be getting up at 5 a.m. most mornings, because like you said about the time difference, like most football managers all over the world, you've got agents that you're in contact with, but here for Cambodia, like, we would have Brazilian agents and Australian and Japanese agents. So that's the main reason for the early starts, is that it gives you a chance all the time to keep in touch about recruitment, because recruitment is just, I think it's maybe 70% of the job, to be honest with you, getting that right. We trained in most mornings. The bus would leave the gym that we train in at about 7:15 in the morning. We get to the training ground around 8 o'clock. Train every day on the grass, and then some days we'd have a double in the gym. And then, like, the rest of your working day, if you like, is just your normal football manager's working day. Your planning training sessions. There's obviously the language barrier, so that can take a little bit longer. The good thing about this job when I came in is there was a blank canvas in a way. It has an academy, it has its own stadium, but things weren't really developed in terms of my vision for the club was to develop all the departments in the football club. So what would a recruitment department look like? What would an analysis one, a strength and conditioning, medical, etc., etc. So basically I'm here 2 years, and we're very much still in the middle of all of that, as you can imagine, because Cambodia's recent history, we're only maybe a generation removed from mass genocide here, and from some real, horrible troubles that they had. So things like coach education and player development, it has a long way to go. But from my perspective, that's a real positive, because you can just dig in, and there's always a challenge for you at the beginning of every day,
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the football in a second, Conor, but just life in general as an Irish person living there. I spent maybe 4 nights there on holidays before I went to Vietnam and to Thailand a couple of years ago, and like, I loved it. We stayed in an amazing hotel. The weather was fantastic. I'm the fussiest eater in the world, so I was eating Western food, burgers and pizzas and all that sort of stuff as well. I know you're in the middle of doing a thing called a season in Cambodia, and in that you talk about snakes for lunch or something like that. So just what's kind of life like, from the food to the language to the people to the weather, all that sort of stuff, because it's certainly very different to Limerick or Melbourne or Dublin, for example.
Yeah, it is different to Limerick. I don't know if you can get snakes for lunch in Limerick. I'm not so sure. How you described it really is probably my life in terms of your experience when you were here is the life that I get to live, which is great. So for very little money, like, you can live in an apartment that like has a swimming pool and a sauna and a gym, etc. So for small money can go a long way, and that's one of the positives of living in a developing country, I guess. If you're an expat, the expat community is very close as well. So yeah, every day you can go and eat whatever cuisine you want, really. But I suppose the snakes for lunch story, which is probably the one you're interested in, actually comes from my time with the semi-pro team. That the semi-pro team had, you'd have your WhatsApp groups back home or whatever, but it's all on Messenger here. Cambodians love Facebook. So the players here, they'll be sharing what they are having for lunch and stuff on your Messenger groups. And one day, like, I just got this, someone's lunch was shared, and I like went to the coach that was translating for me. Like, he had to translate the photo. I had no idea what I was looking at, and it was basically a snake that whatever they catch in the wild here, like, they cook it and they eat it, literally everything. And obviously that's come from the recent history that I mentioned earlier in terms of, needs must. But now it's more a case of like the French with their delicacies a little bit, like, that some people, they like eating snakes, so they eat snake. And basically, if you can fry it, they'll eat it. And that's the locals, a bit of rice and fried whatever, and they'll eat it. And for sure that took a little bit of getting used to when I first came here, but I haven't sampled it, so I can't really judge too much.
Yeah, I was going to say, have they not made their manager or asked their manager or suggested their manager try some of what they're eating?
They make jokes about it every now and then, but the benefit of being the guy that picks the team, so they can't really force the issue too much. So
of course.
Yeah, so that's one of the benefits. Maybe if I wasn't the guy picking the team, I might have eaten snake already at this stage.
And how's the language? You mentioned there having to sometimes have a translator translate not just people speaking or actual bits of text or emails. I'm sure you can do that yourself via your laptop, but like even someone to translate a photo for you and work on the training pitch, talking to the players, talking to the media, I'm sure as well. How do you do all that?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that. The first thing is I had a Cork man translate for me in my first season. So I mean, you can imagine the comedy. A Limerick man getting Khmer, which is Cambodian, translated by a Cork man. So that had some interesting moments. But Conor Wall is his name. He's a good friend of mine now, and he worked with us in our first season here, and he's lived here for 14 years, and he learned to read, write, and speak Khmer, and he speaks it like a Cambodian. Like, he's an amazing fella. So he was a massive help to me in the first season. And the first season here, like, we finished sixth. It went really, really badly. Everything that could go wrong really went wrong. But we kind of got through it. And Conor was a big reason why we got through it. But now, like, two years in, I can speak about the football instructions in Khmer, because as you know, there's not a lot to say really on, like, in instruction wise. You don't need to know a lot of words. I can order my coffee or pay for the bill in Cambodian. I can have a short conversation with someone. Unfortunately, what normally happens is whatever question I ask, they say something back, and 2 or 3 questions in, I'm in a bit of trouble. Because actually understanding the language here, it's not too bad, but pronouncing the words, it's very like, maybe some Irish people have heard like Chinese spoken. It's a bit like that. It's like you're using whole sides of your mouth that you just don't use when you speak English. So it's very difficult to pronounce it, and I'm still struggling with that. But from a day-to-day kind of managing a football team, it's not so difficult now. Although most of our staff and players would have very limited understanding of English. But I'm here 2 years now, so they pretty much know what I want from them at this stage. So.
And Conor, I'm just looking here on my laptop. It's just after 4 p.m. where you are, 10 a.m. here in Ireland, and it says it's still 34 degrees Celsius in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. Is that about right? I can see a nice breeze in your hair, and we can hear the breeze a little bit.
Yeah. No, it was 42 degrees, would you believe, about 10 days ago. And I never look forward to April. April is really, really unpleasantly hot here. So one benefit really of us not playing games this month is, that I'm not worried about heat exhaustion, with some of the players, because our facilities are quite good, but some of our away games, the facilities aren't great. And that would mean some clubs don't have floodlights. So you play in 3:30 in like you said, you'll be playing now and it's 35 degrees, and that's not really synonymous with good football, number one, and it's not the healthiest either. So that's the one benefit of the games getting cancelled this month, that it does get a little bit cooler. But yeah, maybe 11 months of the year it's in and around 30 degrees, and then you get a month or two where it's rainy season, where more rain than you'll ever have seen in your life will fall in about an hour or two. So in 1 or 2 hours you'll get like an incredible amount of rain, and like I've seen a fair amount of rain in Limerick, but it's rainy season here. It's something to behold.
So Conor, talk to me about the football, the club you work for, the league. I know there's some great stuff on your Instagram of league trophies and lots of success. So again, for someone listening or watching, including me, who knows very little about where you are, what the league is like, what your job is like from a football sense, you might explain all of that, please.
Well, the first thing that grabbed me when I came here is like, when I worked with Limerick, for example, our under-19s team, and we had some brilliant players, like Paddy O'Connor ended up going to Leeds and he's at Bradford now, but we had a lot of good players, and in the summer months we got them 3, maybe 4 times a week, but once school started it was twice a week in a game. But all of the clubs here, there's 13 teams in the top league, and all bar maybe one have an under-18s academy at least that are like full-time. Now the kids would go to school, but they train every single day. So that was the first thing that grabbed me here, in terms of like, you got a chance if you're doing it every day. It's really, really difficult to become a professional footballer if you're not doing it every day. I think that's one of the main challenges that we have in Ireland, except for the likes of Rovers, obviously. And I know more clubs maybe now are doing a little bit more in terms of contact hours. Most clubs here have their own stadium, or a rental agreement where they have their own stadium. The pitches vary. Once you go outside the capital city, it can be the capital city and Siem Reap, which I think may have been where you visited, Jamie.
Yes, correct.
They have good stadiums, good pitches, but then when you go out into the more kind of rural areas, the pitches can be a little bit agricultural, the stadiums and the facilities can be on the poor side, and like I mentioned about the floodlights already. But a big game here, you get 4, maybe 5,000 people. If it's two big teams and they're both going well, you get maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people. For us, for our home games, if it's just like a normal game, you get somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. But like I said, if it's a top of the table clash or something, you'll get more. And yeah, like you said, we were fortunate. We won the league last year. Unfortunately, we lost in the cup final, and we also lost our last league game of the season. So we were close to winning 2 trophies and being undefeated all year, but didn't quite get over the line. And that meant us qualifying for the AFC Cup, which is kind of the Asian equivalent of the Europa League. So we had to go through a playoff against a team from Laos, a 2-legged playoff, and we negotiated that, and we played Ceres Negros, which is a Philippine team which has mainly European players. So for example, their top player played I think maybe 70 or 80 games for Hoffenheim in Germany, so really, really high level. And then we were fortunate to beat Bali United before the AFC shut down, and Bali United would play in front of 25,000 people. So when they came here, we beat them in our home game, and their budget would be about 10 times our size. So I think it's probably the equivalent of a League of Ireland team playing in the Europa League for you to try and get results. It is hard to kind of describe the difference between levels, but I think that's probably a fair assessment. And yeah, you can have 5 foreigners, only 4 on the pitch at any one time, and that's kind of all. The rest of the players then will be local. We've got 4 national team players, and the national team played Bahrain recently, lost 1-0 to a last minute goal, and Bahrain had some players that play for Sparta Prague, for example, who would have been playing against Inter Milan. So it's a funny one when people ask me about the level. I think on our day here, the teams would give top teams back home a game. If it was out here in 35-degree heat, I think we'd give lots of teams a game. But maybe if it was in Sligo on a windy night, maybe we might struggle a bit.
And like your job as the manager, Conor, and great things to hear. All the League of Ireland teams here now, are very, very professional in terms of like how they train and how the players look after themselves, and access to video, and access to most teams have the players wearing some sort of GPS and nice buses for away games and pre-match meals and all that sort of stuff as well. For you as a football manager over there, what type of access do you have to stuff like that to do your job?
So when I pitched for the job, so they met me and I pitched a vision for the team. So video analysis was part of that vision, that I wanted a video analysis platform. I won't mention any companies, but we used one for 2 years and now we're using a different one. So we've upped our game really in terms of our use of that. Playing in the AFC Cup meant we needed a package where we could observe teams from several countries. So that was a big part from day one for me. It was kind of a non-negotiable really. I wasn't really interested in the role unless they wanted to invest in that, because actually it's not a lot of money when you compare it to like player salaries and stuff like that. So that's somewhere where I was able to kind of make an improvement here straight away, because it wasn't really being done. There was teams doing analysis, but they weren't using platforms and maybe going into it in top detail. So GPS, we have GPS now for every player. We were able to strike a deal with a Korean company, and we have a strength and conditioning coach I was able to bring in this season who worked with West Brom in the past. So he deals with all that, and we use GPS to see if we're overloading the players. We use GPS if I think somebody's being lazy and I want to give them a kick up the backside. I think we're on a par. We don't have a full-time analyst, but I work quite hard on that side of it myself anyway. So I think we'd be on a par with most teams in Ireland on that side of it. And I think a lot of the other countries now, other teams in this country now are going that way, because we won the league last year and people heard about it, and now they're all doing it. And funnily enough, like my first season, like I said, it wasn't that successful, but like I knew my CEO was a data-driven person, a numbers person, like most CEOs are. So before ever a ball was kicked, before I accepted the job or they offered it to me, I explained like XG to the CEO. And for maybe listeners that aren't familiar with it, it's just it puts a calculation on every shot you take and every shot the opponent takes, and it's a way of tracking kind of your progress as a team. Sometimes the results obviously are an indicator, but XG is over a long-term point of view. XG is probably a better indicator of how the coach is doing with the players. And we had some other key performance indicators that I guess, educated the CEO about. And he liked that straight away from the beginning. And I can say like XG saved my job after my first year here. And then thankfully the players delivered and the XG turned into results, so I was grateful for that.
Yeah, really interesting. The joys, Conor, working from home. I hope you can't hear my dog barking, can you? Because I can, and I'm about to cook him for my breakfast. As you were saying about eating snakes, because I don't have a studio clearly because I'm working from home, and I hope the people can't hear him or see him because he's down. I'm upstairs in a little home office, and I can just hear him barking at the. I've been down to him. He's been out in the garden. He's going to go for a walk now, and he's roaring down there. So I apologise.
Well, I don't want any animal rights activist people getting you in trouble, Jamie. But I can stress that here in Cambodia, that's not a delicacy that the locals partake in. But our home stadium's in Swaireen, which is halfway between Phnom Penh and Saigon or Ho Chi Minh. So I have heard stories of people sneaking across the border because in Vietnam they do partake in that particular dish, unfortunately.
Yes, well, I was joking. I'm not going to cook my dog. I do love him.
I'm glad you cleared that up.
Tell me about your life off the pitch, Conor. And I'm just looking here again on YouTube of Pub Street in Siem Reap, which is where I was for a few days before I went along to Vietnam. We actually arrived to Cambodia the night Ireland played Denmark in that famous playoff, the 5-1 game a couple of years ago. I think it was 2016, wouldn't it? Would it be 2016? Must have been 2016 or 2018 maybe, God knows. Anyway, we got there and we'd been travelling all night and we'd had a few drinks, and by the time the match started we could hardly see the ball because we travelled all night and the time just and a few drinks and stuff. But that place called Pub Street is just mad. And I know you live in a different part, but what do you get up to away from being a football manager to relax, unwind, chill out and stuff?
Yep. One of the difficulties, actually, Phnom Penh's nightlife is a lot more crazy than Pub Street. So we have to be careful here when we recruit foreign players that, like I said, recruitment's about 70% of the job. I think if you get your recruitment right, coaching is easy if you got good people. We had to work very hard making sure that, like, when we were employing foreigners and stuff, that it would be people that were very disciplined, because if you're a young man and you're fit and you're healthy, for example, you could definitely go down the wrong route here. Phnom Penh for sure. Having said that, there's a much nicer side to the city as well, and Siem Reap actually is beautiful where you are, and the different parts of Cambodia is beautiful. The people are very fun-loving and open and just kind of kind people. So yeah, the lifestyle is great here. I mean, when you work in football, when you're winning, everything is like 10 times better. When you're losing, it doesn't matter if you're in LA, you're not going to be happy. But yeah, when you're winning and you can kind of take that Monday off after the Sunday game, you can pretty much do anything you can do at home. But I think the chances of the sun shining is probably a little bit higher. But at the same time, you long for home. You know what I mean? That there are some things that are uniquely Irish that, particularly when you go away from home, you miss them.
And lastly, Conor, speaking of longing for home, what does the future hold for you from a football sense? I know you're in contract there and you're loving life there too, but is the ambition to manage in the League of Ireland here, to go back to Australia, to stay in that part of the world, or are you just trying to ride the wave at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to manage in the League of Ireland, because I was a League of Ireland fan before I ever, I got to work with Tommy Barrett and Derek McCarthy when I was at under-19s level, and I watched both of them play for Limerick. So that in itself was and still is a career highlight for me. But like I said at the beginning of our chat, like destinations really aren't what I think of when I'm thinking of what I want to do next time. I'm thinking more about like how I can affect players, clubs, supporters' enjoyment of the game, because that's where you get your buzz from. So right now I can't really see beyond this football club, because they're giving me everything kind of I desire as a young coach trying to learn his craft, and also as like me and the general manager here who's from Edinburgh. He's a Hearts fan for his sins, Christopher Grant. The two of us are running the football club kind of from top to bottom, and while that's very, very challenging, like I'm 36 tomorrow, I didn't think I'd be given that opportunity. So I think I'm just going to crack at it here and learn as much as I can learn. And eventually someone's going to fire me probably, because you can't keep winning. And I think I'll worry about what's next kind of when that happens, or if someone knocks on my door, then I'll answer the door. Like, but I'm really genuinely not really thinking about it,
Great stuff. That is fascinating from Conor Nestor in Cambodia. And Conor, an early happy birthday.
Thank you, Jamie. I made sure that you were the first man to say there, because I dropped the hint.
Of course, and I might find out the cafe you're in, send them a little email with my Revolut and buy you a snake sandwich for your breakfast. How about that?
I'm not frequenting in any of those restaurants. No, you won't be able to do that. So that gets you out of jail on that one, Jamie. Great
stuff, Conor. Thanks a million for your time. And how good is technology? I'm sitting in Dublin. You're in Cambodia. And apart from the tiny bit of wind at your end at times, which is fine, the Wi-Fi was perfect on Skype. So God love technology.
Yeah, that's true.
Conor, thanks a million. Stay safe. Speak to you soon, man.
You too. Take care, buddy. Bye.